session. Okay, yes, take it away.
All right, cool. Let me just try and share my screen first. Um, Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, welcome everyone. What we're planning to do is I'll just spend about 10-15 minutes going through my slides and talking about what it's like to be designing during this time, during a global pandemic. Feel free to add your questions to the chat, and Kate and I are planning to do a bit of a Q&A after this and spend more time on Q&A. So I would really welcome any questions. So yeah, hello. I'm Aditi, and I'm a UX manager at Shopify. Today, I'm going to talk about designing for commerce during a pandemic. And I try to actually make a meme about this. So I don't know how many people have seen this Galaxy Brain meme, which is like you're doing design, then you're doing design remotely, but you're actually doing design remotely while working in the e-commerce industry, and then during a global pandemic. So it's a pretty it's a pretty tough situation, but I also feel pretty lucky that I get to work here. So first, I want to talk about what is Shopify. So we are a platform that allows merchants to sell anywhere, and anyone can be a merchant. And our roots are in e-commerce, but we do enable our merchants to sell through multiple sales channels. And that can be on the web, it can be in person. We do have a POS as well for brick and mortar merchants, and you can do that through social media as well. So yeah, it's Shopify, it's not Spotify, and so just want to clarify there. And the other thing I want to also clarify is that we are not a marketplace. So like Shopee and Lazada and all of the other marketplaces that you see online, Shopify is a platform that's used by merchants. So you don't see the Shopify branding upfront. It's about the merchants, and the merchants are empowered to sell however they want. So one of the cool things about working in Shopify is that merchants are at the center of everything that we do, and that's a value that really matches with me. And so I just wanted to cover that a bit. So what about the UX team? I think Kiet also asked me to mention, kind of how we work at Shopify. So overall, the entire Shopify is really centered around merchants and making like a really good experience for merchants. And then what is it like to work within the Shopify UX team? Within that, I think that's really interesting. I joined last year and onboarded last year, and it's been a really interesting experience because it's the first time for me that I'm in a company with such a mature UX organization. And I would really recommend going to our blog and reading up from the other design leaders at Shopify about how they think about design. But one of the really cool things, I mean, it's about 400 people in total. And in the UX team, we kind of have a multidisciplinary approach. We include researchers, content people, designers, everything included in UX. So I really like the idea of having that all-inclusive approach to UX, and that's pretty inspiring. This is actually a card deck that I got when we joined. So of course this is before COVID. So this is a card deck that teaches new people who join the Shopify UX team about what our values are. It's pretty cool, and but of course designed for a real life workshop. But I still kind of really enjoy this deck, even though I just have it alone in my house. So I just talk about like some of our values. So this deck is created to teach people about what are Shopify UX team's values. So obviously we want to build experiences that are trustworthy, efficient, crafted, considerate, and empowering for merchants. And out of all of these values, the bits I want to kind of underline is number one, empowering. Like merchants are business people, they are entrepreneurs, They know what they're doing. They're experts in their role, and so we want to empower them to do the best job they can do and to succeed the best they can. So I think that's kind of our goal when we build these tools, and that respect and that uh, respect that we have for merchants' independence, I hope comes through in our product. The other one that I want to underline is, as a value, is also familiar. Like, my team here works in APAC, so we work to make things better for merchants in this region, in Asia and APAC, and we have to do a lot of stuff still on improving the experience and making things easier for merchants to succeed here. So that's a bit about our Shopify UX team. If you do have more questions, do post them in the chat, and we can discuss after this talk. We have a lot of UX rituals as well. So one of our rituals is Fresh Eyes, which is kind of like a way to get feedback from other UX folks in the team or outside your team. And this ritual has been going on for years, and it's really well developed. And I learned a lot from attending Fresh Eyes in Shopify. One of the cool things about this is that you give feedback to others, but you also get feedback about how you give feedback. So that's pretty cool because you can improve on the way that you give feedback. So it's kind of like inception feedback, which is very cool. So that's a bit about Shopify and Shopify UX. And then when you look at Shopify UX, and then the impact of COVID, I managed to get a few numbers that I can mention in the context of Singapore and for the month of April, which is kind of around COVID. We did see a pretty big increase in online store creations. We did see a pretty big increase in consumers who bought online for the first time from a Shopify merchant. I mean, they may not know that it's Shopify because they only see the merchant branding, but we saw a huge increase in people buying online for the first time from somebody who's not a marketplace seller, which is pretty cool. And then we also saw a really big, steep increase in buy online, pick up in store orders. So for brick and mortar merchants, because more and more brick and mortar merchants wanted to, uh, figure out how to go digital. So there is this clear, move towards going to digital, unfortunately, due to COVID. But also, I guess I do see the positive side of that as more people go digital and hopefully gain new avenues to sell directly to their customers. So that's pretty cool, and it's pretty cool to see this behavior. Though I do want to caveat by saying that even though we see this consumer behavior and increase in buying online, we are in a very kind of uh, uncertain time economically, and so we don't know how sustainable that is as well. So it remains to be seen how long we will see this go on for. Cool. So that's a bit about Shopify UX, and also COVID. Now I just want to go a little bit deeper into what's it like to do design in a remote situation. I think it's easier in a situation where you already have your UX rituals set and the team is already used to working in certain ways. So I just want to also preface by saying it's not normal work from home, as everyone keeps saying. It's working from home during a pandemic. So that's very, very different. Um, any existing communication problems that your team has, kind of can become worse when you start working remotely. It's a real test of your team's resilience. And so at least as a design manager, for me, it was about being flexible and being there and supporting the team. Everyone has very different work from home situations as well. Some people are parents, some people have dependents, some people are taking care of their children. And so it really depends what work from home situation you are in. What helped us is async long form communication, short rich videos, and we of course minimized meetings. We have something in Shopify called No Meeting Wednesdays. That's amazing, and I'm so glad that we are quite strict about that as well. So um, it keeps at least some time free, at least my week on how like busy your week can be when you're working remotely. Having that Wednesday off for gives you time to do focus work. So what are our tools? I think we have a bunch of tools that we use in our team here in Singapore. Different teams work differently across Shopify. So I can speak to my team here in APAC. We basically use Google Docs, Figma, GitHub, Slack, and Hangouts for video calls. That's kind of our set of comms that we do. Slack is temporary. We try to avoid putting very important information into Slack as storage. So I think if you want to say something very important, if it's a project brief, if it's design, if it's an important decision, then it needs to go into GitHub or Figma or Google Docs. So that's kind of how we do it. And like I said, we really minimize video meetings as much as we can. The other thing that we do is we have like a 90s chat room. So it's kind of like really weird, but we have like people saying hi, I'm awake now, or like I'm going to step out for 5 minutes to have coffee, or somebody says, I'm taking a break for 30 minutes. So people are like constantly posting, like whether they're online or offline, and that creates this sense of space and makes it feel better when you're working remotely, I think. The other thing I would say is a trust battery is very critical. This is very typical of Shopify culture. You'll hear the term trust battery a lot. And when you join Shopify, the cool thing is that you don't have to prove yourself as such. Like people already assume you know what you're doing, which is great. And you can just get started. Like there's a high trust, and then you go from there. So I really like that, and it's helpful in a remote situation. I think when I hear stories of remote work not working, it's because there is no trust battery, and somebody is just not able to trust their team to do their job. So that's very important. So yeah, over communicate. Do as much of that as you can. That is crucial to succeed in this sort of remote design situation. I really like this chart on radical candor. It's another thing that's pretty interesting. So when you do say over communicate, how do you do that? Definitely you should be over communicative, but you should also care. So the care is required. Otherwise, it just becomes obnoxious. So I think that's very important, and this chat is important. And if you care a lot but you don't say anything, that can also be very damaging to the team. So when it comes to this sort of communication, it's important to already have, I would say, this kind of level of radical candor in your team before you go remote. If you don't have it, then building it while you're remote is quite hard. But I would really encourage everyone to try. There's a link here. Go to the website Radical Candor. They have a really good book. Read the book. They have a lot of ways of how you can do that if your team is not there yet. So I think I've seen this really often here, which is this ruinous empathy, which is like people understand, but then they don't say anything, and it becomes really damaging. And then I've seen this as well, like just people being like overly challenging for no reason, and preventing work. So yeah, I think communication is key. The other advice I would give is obviously like talk to people who have been doing design. I spoke to Shaza a few months back, I think, or I don't know, I lost track of time, but she's really cool and she knows everything about doing remote design. So speak to people who have done it before and get advice from them, and then just do what they tell you to do. So that's been very helpful for me as well. So she told me about focus hours. Mark your focus hours online. Everyone has different focus hours. Like for example, for me, I'm very awake in the morning, and by evening, like around this time, I start to just switch off. So it's important for people to know when your hours are, and find common areas that you can work. And then of course, create your workspace. So this is my office where I'm at right now, and I recognize I'm very lucky that I can do this. But I think do figure out how you can have some sort of work from home situation as a designer that is sustainable. Otherwise, you're going to kind of be stuck in this work life balance situation, which is not good. By the way, when you see my screen, can you see the entire screen, or are you seeing the video on the side as well? I'm not sure.
So you
We're
need
seeing the
for
slides,
the screen.
but not in presentation mode though.
I'm not in presentation mode.
Yeah.
Uh, Let me just see if that works. But you can see the whole slide, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll just leave it as that.
Work and life.
Yeah, working life. Okay, cool. Just checking before I keep going. So yeah, so I think balancing that work life is really important, and having a space to do that is important. So though I recognize that not everyone can have a space like physically, so think about how you can create like another way to create a space. So one way that I have seen my team do it is having a work artifact, like have like a jacket or a watch, or something that you wear at the beginning of your workday and then you take off at the end of your workday. Like sometimes when I have important meetings, I wear a jacket even though I'm like just wearing normal home clothes, just to feel like I'm in an important meeting. So I think that's it's just an artifact to put you in the right mode of thinking, and to create that space even if you don't physically have the space. And then also create a place in some way, like even if you have a chair for work, I would recommend using a different chair for watching Netflix. Like don't use the same chair if you're watching Netflix versus being in a work situation. Like that's when you don't divide work life properly. So like figure out a way to, if you're working on the same table, then work on one side of the table and another side of the table. I don't know, like anything you can do to like separate where you sit when you're working and where you sit when you're just on YouTube doing random stuff. So like try different ways to like divide that, and I think that helps a lot. Some interesting notes, and I think I've had a lot of chats with people in Singapore and my colleagues about it, is that why is online so hard, and I think Kiet was also mentioning that today before we started. Like Zoom can be tiring, like you're doing video calls all day. Why is it tiring? It's just, I think, a lack of body language, and you can't see how the other person is truly feeling. You have to put so much more effort in understanding what they're trying to say, and that can be tiring. And it's hard to tell where the natural pauses are, so people are like weirdly interrupting each other. So there's all of this stuff happening. So I think it's important to acknowledge that and to not act as if everything is fine. Like I think it's important to acknowledge that, yeah, this is a different situation, different way of communicating, and it's not going to be perfect. And how can we kind of evolve that better. Um, so yeah, what is the new digital etiquette in meetings? I think somebody mentioned that in the beginning of this chat. One way is, I think, you unmute yourself. So an unmute means that you want to say something. Usually if someone's sitting in front of you in a meeting, they lean forward, they like take a breath, you like know they want to say something. But here it's kind of hard to tell. Like I don't know right now who wants to say stuff or who has questions. I really, I'm basically speaking into the void. So I think we need to really create new digital etiquette and figure out how to do this in a way that we can all still connect. I'm personally very glad that the lockdown is over and we can all meet in real life once in a while. So that's been really great for me. But if we do continue working digitally, like how would that work is, I think, interesting. And then also fun. Like I think fun is important, and how do you ensure that the team still enjoys themselves. Like one thing that we are doing here in Singapore is that we are still meeting once a month. Some of my one-on-ones are in real life in a coffee shop. So we are trying to make sure that even though we are working digitally and working from home all the time, that we still spend some quality time together, and we are hanging out and having conversations that are not work conversations. I think your relationship with your colleagues can become super transactional if you're only talking about work. I love this example of the Figma event that happened. I love it. And I think it's a great example of how we can have fun online as well. Though of course so much effort goes into this and it's so much work and it's crazy amounts of work. This is really cool. So yeah, I think overall, there's a couple of things I covered, which is what Shopify is, the kind of stuff that's happening during COVID, and how Shopify UX works. If you have any questions about this, do ask them, and we can cover it during a Q&A. And then I covered a few tips about how to work remotely as a designer, though they can be used generically as well. And this is all stuff that we have tried. Before I go further, are there any questions that we should cover yet?
Um, okay, so I think one first thing I have to put in the disclaimer is that I finally managed to turn off that chime.
Okay, good. I was just trying to get through it, like I just ignored.
I know. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I've been searching high and low for the setting, but anyway, yeah, it's done. I think it just feels like above you mentioned about one-on-ones, right? So I'm curious as in this role that you're in now, uh, what goes into your one-on-ones? Like, what are the things that you guys talk about? How do you run your one-on-ones?
That's a good question. I think the one-on-ones are very individual depending on the designer, because I have sometimes very senior designers in my team who may not need that much design skills guidance, but we may talk about career growth. So it's really tailored to and I'm pretty I really prefer weekly one-on-ones, though of course some people prefer bi-weekly. But I like to like check in and see how people are doing, and talk about like career growth, like skill stuff, project stuff, like anything that it's just a way for me to figure out, I think, how to support those UX people who are there in my team, and what I need to do and plan for. Sometimes, of course, a designer may say that I want to do this kind of project, and that project doesn't exist yet. So then, if I know that they want to do that kind of project and that's their learning path, then I can curate that and make sure that that happens. So it's really, I would say, it's overall very flexible, but it's a overall about career growth and check-in. Um, I think in remote situations, it becomes even more important to make sure you know how people are doing as a human being as well, and not just in a work situation. So we do retros as well as a group, which is interesting. I think retros are also a great way to talk about feelings and what's going well and what's not going well, and what we can do to improve it. So though retros are with the entire R&D team, it's a great way to figure out how to improve. As long as you're always in that mode, I think it's helpful. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I think there are some interesting questions that are coming through. I've been trying to capture them. One of them is like, how do you, from Shreya, right? Shreya, do you want to just unmute and ask the question?
Yeah, I think when because of the connection, the chat went. So my question was like, how do you provide design critique to your team members in terms of review, feedback? What is the process you follow at Shopify?
That's a great question. So I think I mentioned Fresh Eyes. So Fresh Eyes is one way. Then we also do reviews with engineers and product folks on our team. And what helps, I think, with reviews is there's two kinds. I think one is when we are reviewing like the product goals, like why are we doing what we're doing, and the way we work is that we have a trifecta here. So UX, product, and engineering work together to make decisions. So it's very collaborative. So that means that sometimes the project could be at a very early stage where you still need to clarify why are you doing this and what's the impact for merchants and how is it going to help merchants. So one kind of, I think, feedback is clarifying the goal and making sure that's clear. Once that's clear, I think then the feedback would be more design related and interaction
Okay.
related. And so we have rituals like Fresh Eyes, but it could also be on the spot if required. If it's remote, then sometimes what designers do is that they take a video of their Figma, like a short 5 or 8 minute video of their Figma designs, explaining everything, and then they send it across to Canada so that we don't have to do like some crazy time zone design review as well. So we do some async as well. And what helps is that everyone writes project briefs very, very well in Shopify. Like what's written in the project brief is reality. So that helps a lot. And there's less ambiguity there.
Has there been times when the project briefs are like, what? Why are we even doing this? Like, spec.
Everyone goes through that. I think most people there's a lot of openness in the company for questioning why we're doing what we're doing. So I think that's a good thing. And one of the values that we have is building for the long term. So definitely no one wants to do some short term hack, like that's not happening. So there's a lot of questioning of, is this actually going to help merchants? Is this just some short term thing that's not going to be helpful in the long term? And then if it's decided that it's not going to be helpful, we won't do it. So I think there's always that option available for everyone, which is quite cool.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to carry on, or do
Yeah.
you want to continue answering more questions?
Sure. I can go. I just have a few slides left, so I can like finish and then we can do more questions.
Okay.
I guess these slides are more about the COVID situation and the pandemic situation. I think these photos are photos that I took while I was hiking in McRitchie. So that was my break from lockdown, and it helped me stay a bit sane. But it also like shows like how difficult it is to function. So in terms of productivity, obviously as a team, there's a lot going on because we are in a commerce company and we are shipping a lot of things during a pandemic. But I think there has to be this understanding that we are still in a difficult situation. So how are we going to help the team remain productive and have rest? So one of the cool things that the talent team has done is that they've given us Fridays off. So we've had 4-day weeks now for a few weeks. At least, I mean, it's temporary, but it's very cool, and it really the team is super happy about it. So I think there has to be a release as well. Like you have to take breaks to remain productive. So I think that's really cool. There was a loss of routine, and weird stuff was happening because of the COVID. So having a break and taking rest was important. I want to mention this is more like a personal thing. Like I did see a lot of people post weird stuff on LinkedIn about how the COVID situation has actually made them better and stuff. Like I think it's important to recognize that what's happening is not good, and a lot of merchants are losing their businesses, and it's a really tough time. Some of my favorite bars and restaurants in Singapore are closing down for the first, forever. It's really hard. So I think it's good to see the positive, but it's also very healthy to accept that bad stuff is also happening, and I think that's healthy. So yeah, I think don't shy away from that sadness or that grief. It's important to. One of the really cool things that my boss said is she said just take a do-away day, which is just you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like doing any work, so you just tell everyone I'm taking a do-away day. So that's really nice as well. I think that's a good way to like de-stress, and you don't have to explain why you're taking a day off. You're not sick, but you just want to take a day, and I think that's pretty cool. This seems to be a UK concept, but from what I know, only Canadian people have told me about this. So it's a nice thing that we do here in our team. And the last thing I want to talk about is about more related to commerce again, and about how COVID has kind of impacted it. I think a lot of really large companies and really large systems are highly efficient. And when you are in such a highly efficient system, anything that happens is just going to break your system. So it's the same with design as well. If your design process is so efficient and so anti basically it's so well designed that if any changes happen in your environment, that system no longer works. So I think that's something that we are seeing with our food supply during the COVID, and that actually made me kind of see this other dichotomy, which was resilient systems are not brutally efficient, and that's why all these small and medium merchants are so important. We need to have all of this variety and all of this diversity. It makes our economy more resilient, and it's very important to have. If we just have one giant super efficient thing, it can easily break down the moment there's a crisis like COVID. So I think having that resilience is very important, and I hope that we can make tools to help merchants be resilient. We've created this thing to help more restaurants come online as well. So anything that we can do to like help people survive the pandemic is good, like, I think overall. So yeah, I think overall when it comes to talking about COVID, be aware the toxic positivity, hold space for the negative, acknowledge that it's there. Take a do-away day, take a break. It makes you more productive in the end, and know that you know brutally efficient systems are not resilient and will not survive these big things like COVID. So I think that's interesting. That's it from me. I hope I didn't take too long. And I do want to mention we are hiring. We are hiring in Japan and India soon. I'm going to be starting new design teams there. So we're hiring designers and researchers. So if you're interested, do apply or DM me on LinkedIn. You'll be able to see the roles on our careers page. And that's it from me.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that's the thing about like remote. We have to have some like sound effects.
It's
Just
very cool. Thank you for
things.
that.
I'm really curious. 4-day work week plus do-away day. That means 3 days work week lah. Actually.
I hope that people's do-away days like reduced with 4-day work week, but yeah, I think the 4-day work week was a way to like make sure people are taking vacations, because I think we found that a lot of people were not taking vacations because there was nowhere to go. So it's like a forced R&R in some ways. But yeah, these are just different ways that you could tell your team to take a break in a weird situation where you can't fly home, or it's harder to take a holiday. Um, yeah.
Okay, so Bobby has raised his hand. Bobby, you want to just shout out your question? If you're
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, Aditi, one question that I had in mind is, has the remote situation affected research process at Shopify? And if it did, what have you done to work around this?
Yeah, it's definitely affected our research. So I actually had to pause my research projects in Jan, because that's when China's COVID situation was pretty bad, like Jan, Feb. And I visited China earlier last year, and we were supposed to go again. So I think definitely all the in-person interviews are gone, which sucks. I think it's nice to meet merchants in real life, and I enjoy doing that. So that's sad. But at the same time, we've managed to switch to remote interviews as well, which works pretty well, as like it's nice. I think it definitely doesn't. I think it's definitely not as good as meeting people in real life and having that human connection, but we can still do video chats, we can still do audio chats with merchants, and still go ahead with our research. So overall research impact is that we paused it temporarily because we didn't want to disturb merchants during such a difficult time. And then when things started to get better, we continued our research. So that's kind of how we were impacted.
Yeah, sorry, he had one follow-up question. And how do you manage to get merchants to sign up for remote chats? I mean, so it's a different ball. It's a different ball of a problem, because to get them sign up for online chats or meetings is incredibly hard because their time is they're worrying about 100 different things, and then you asking for feedback or research is maybe 0.1 of their priorities. So how do you get that time with them?
It's always hard. Like I don't have any easy answers on that. Like with Shopify, it's like I think easier because merchants love Shopify, so they want to talk to us and they're quite motivated to give us feedback. Um, but yeah, it is hard, and we have to really try hard to find 5 or 6 merchants who are the right people to talk to, because we're not just speaking to any merchant, we are speaking to a merchant who has the kind of feedback that we want. So yeah, it's hard to recruit. um, I don't have a solution for you on that.
I guess
Yeah, I mean,
if they rely on Shopify product, definitely it is in their own interest to improve it, right? Like to help me improving it and providing the feedback needed.
Yeah, I think recruiting is tough, and also we are pretty strict on like data privacy. So uh, we just go about it by sending emails to only the merchants who have said yes to that, and then we wait to get interviews. Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay. Moving on to Pei Ting. Pei Ting has a question. Pei Ting, do you want to unmute and share?
Okay, sure. Hi, Aditi. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm too soft, sorry. Okay,
It's
so this
okay.
is more of just a general question. What resources would you recommend for anyone who maybe from the perspective of not currently being in e-commerce, but would love to learn about designing for e-commerce? Yeah. Any recommendations for resources? Yeah.
That's interesting. I think there are a lot of books, very interesting books on e-commerce, in the e-commerce industry. So if you mean understanding more about the domain, that's always an option. Um, I would discourage Medium articles is all I can say. And then the other thing I would say is, in my personal opinion, talking to people who run their own businesses is the best way to learn about what's happening today in e-commerce. So if you speak to maybe 40 merchants, then you're already on the way of becoming a domain expert, I think. So for example, when I was working at Referral Candy, we interviewed like so many Shopify merchants. It really gives you a different understanding of the e-commerce industry from their perspective. So yeah, I think the typical user interview method works. Reading books to learn more about the domain so that you ask the right questions works as well.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
I think one of the things that I was really also curious about was like in the beginning, January or end of the year last year, things was just kind of like uh, getting started, right? This whole pandemic thing. How has it affected any of your cadence in terms of features to deliver or work things that the team needs to produce as deliverables or anything?
I think like a lot of companies, our strategy has definitely changed. Like I think we all kind of redid our roadmaps and stuff like that, and our priorities changed obviously after COVID. So a lot of things, in a way, it's cool because they were all things that we were planning to do anyway. It was just like, oh, maybe we'll do it later, but now it's like, let's just do it now. So I think
Oh, okay.
it was more of a sense of urgency to do certain kinds of features that I don't want to name, and then there was a change in roadmap, I think. And in terms of APAC, initially we were focusing on, like our team is working on China, but now we're going to be working on Japan and India as well. So there's more of an opportunity for us to help merchants in this region, which is very cool. So in that way, it's been positive, but it's also a lot of work because there's a lot to be done over here. And in terms of cadence, I think productivity is is pretty much the same, though there was an understanding that since everyone's working from home, there will be an impact on productivity, and that's okay. People are not machines, and everyone needs to take off.
Right.
So that's fine. So I think there was that understanding as well. And when you give people breaks and you give people that time, they are fine. So that was.
How would you describe that change in the roadmap or change in the priorities? Right? Is it like, I mean, just to understand like the context of Shopify being a large organization, multi-country, is it like an elephant shifting or more like a monkey jumping, right?
Oh no, what? No, I think things are
How would you describe it? Just yeah.
like both options sound not, but I understand what you're asking. So I think how I would say it is like in a startup, things are very quarterly. Like you have a quarterly goal, and then you kind of work towards a goal, and then the next quarter appears, and then you have another goal, and you work towards the goal. In Shopify, things are more long term. So we're not doing anything for this quarter or next quarter. We have a 3-year plan, and that helps people stay very focused, and that laser focus is there. So we can't too easily, like, it doesn't make sense to just like randomly do stuff. Like, that's definitely not how we worked. So it was more like, okay, we have to do all of this. We want to help merchants, and now there's COVID. So one of the examples I can give you is we extended our trial to 90 days
Mm-hmm.
because we wanted to help merchants during a tough time, and this gives them a longer runway and a longer time to get started. So the 90-day free trial helped a lot of merchants on board, for example. So we did a lot of things to help merchants get on board more easily and stuff like that. But this doesn't like insanely change like the direction that we're going in, you know. So we were always all about going digital and all of that. So that's already in our DNA. So it kind of worked.
Right. So yeah, that was just more to see how agile actually, right, is Shopify being at this size, and yeah, and dealing with a pandemic itself. How
It's
agile are you
pretty
in it?
agile. I was actually quite shocked because the whole company went digital by default overnight. That was insane. And they made this really cool digital by default video as well. I think I have a slide about digital by default. Actually, no, it's just the slide. But the whole company, like, we closed all our offices, and all the like janitors and chefs in the Canadian offices are being trained to be customer support people. I mean, it's crazy. Like, and all of this happened overnight. So I would say I was shocked by how quickly the new reality was accepted, and we will continue to be a digital first company even into next year, even after COVID. So that's really cool, and I really respect that kind of culture of like just jumping into things head first, and then figuring out how to do it later. Like that's pretty nice, and I think it's because it's not that big a company. It's like 5,000 plus employees. It's not as huge as a lot of other companies out there, so we're kind of in between right now, and that gives us that freedom to do stuff.
Right. Okay, Deepan has a question, right? Do you want to unmute and just shout out?
Hi, Aditi.
Hi.
Hi. So my question is more related to startups and the kind of challenges we face, right? As you know, we are in India, and India has its own set of problems, like work connectivity issues, and startups running in a very fast-paced environment, right?
Yeah.
So I work in the healthcare industry, which is kind of doing much better in the COVID situation, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Curefit,
and
right? You're still in Curefit, right? Is it
pardon?
Curefit? Are you still in Curefit?
I work in pharmacy.
Ah, okay. Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So the thing that I wanted to ask is that um, during COVID, right? Working from home becomes very challenging because uh, I'll talk about my company, right? Like, because of COVID, obviously everyone's roadmap changes, and you see a lot of things going off the roof, and things happening very randomly and real time, right? And one of the things which I also notice is we use basically Google Hangouts and for meetings, stand-ups, and all of that. So the communication that happens, right? People, over here also, people hardly put on their video, and a lot of times it's very difficult to understand their reactions or stuff like that. And especially as a manager, I find it difficult to keep myself motivated as well. So just wanted to ask you in general, like, is there any, trick or any suggestion in terms of, how do you keep your team motivated during this time? Because, it's very tough, right? Because, COVID has taken a toll on everyone. And, unlike your company, some of the companies like us are not as flexible in terms of giving, Friday work from Friday leaves and
Yeah,
stuff like.
like, that's crazy. Like, yeah, I understand. Like, I think not every company is going to do a 4-day week. I was actually wondering if I should ever mention it, but I thought I should. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I think if people are feeling unmotivated, that's okay. Like, definitely don't put pressure on yourself to feel like you need to be 100%. I mean, and this is just my personal opinion. Um, at least for the first 2 months of the lockdown, I was totally switched off. Like, I definitely couldn't do this kind of IxDA chat or anything like that. It was only after some time that I started to find a normal, and I was able to like do stuff like how I would usually do. So I think it's okay to feel unmotivated. It's okay to just be there for like a few weeks and not be as productive. I think putting that pressure on yourself to be productive can be damaging. So what I did personally for my team, I'm very lucky. Everyone on my team is like super cool and really open about what they're going through. So I think we don't have very tough deadlines as well. Like, it's not like everything is due tomorrow or stuff like that. And especially during COVID, there's more understanding. So I guess my answer is just that if somebody's feeling unmotivated, just be there for them, and it will eventually get better. Um, what I've seen is people with kids, when schools were closed, that was really tough as well. Some people took 2 weeks off. There's no other way. I think you just have to take a step back from work and families first. So if someone's unmotivated, and try to understand what their situation is. That helps. That has helped me. Try to understand, okay, so you have to do this, you have to like drop your kids off, blah blah blah. It may be that they are motivated, they are just, there's other stuff happening for them. So figuring out their individual situation helps, and then you can work around that. And then other people in the team have to be supportive as well. No matter how supportive you personally are as that person's manager, like, other people in the team have to be supportive as well. Like, if somebody is slacking somebody like every few minutes, that's not helpful, and it needs to be stopped. So so I think sometimes you just have to be very tough, and you just have to be like, no, this is not allowed, because designers and engineers both need quiet time to be productive. If they're constantly in meetings, they cannot do any work. So you need to make sure that their calendars are cleared up. If their whole calendar is full of meetings, then obviously they are unmotivated. So I think there's a lot of things you can do, but number one would be reduce the number of meetings, give them time off, see what's actually interrupting their flow. Yeah, and if they're unmotivated and not super excited, it's okay. I mean, it's COVID. Like, it's hard to be super positive in this situation. So that's
Uh,
what.
how has this role that you're in now different from the previous roles, right? Um, where I think right before Shopify was Indeed, and then referral Candy, right?
Kulkarni. I think
Postman.
startups are very different, right? Things are very fast paced, and you don't have a lot of support from talent and HR. So in Shopify, I have so much support from talent and HR. Like they're always looking into the situation. They're saying, okay, maybe we should do a 4-day work week. They're coaches. You know, if somebody's going through a tough time, they can have coaching sessions, not with me, which is great. You know, like they can speak to someone who is not their direct boss as support. So I think there's a lot of support in larger companies, which makes your job easier as a manager. And then in terms of how UX works in each of these companies, it's wildly different. Like I think it's so different. I think it's hard to compare. So
like let's maybe take an example, because the last time we spoke, you were at Referral Candy, and then how is like work at a Referral Candy different from like the work now?
I think in a lot of startups, my role has been taking the company from 0 to 1. So there was no design team, and then I helped them set up a design team. And I think I did that for another startup as well, which is Postman. So that was also 0 to 1. So it's kind of like UX dark ages, and then helping them get to a better state, and then they improve from there. So versus Shopify, where it's a very mature UX company, UX team. You know, everyone from the founders to like the product managers, the product directors, everyone cares a lot about UX. You don't have to convince anyone that UX is important. They already understand that it's important. You don't have to convince anyone that research is important. They already know it's important. So the only conversation you'll have is, what research questions are you asking? Are you asking the right research questions? So I think it's great. I think there are pros and cons. I wouldn't say one way is bad and the other is good. Like I learned a lot being in startups. It really helped me get shit done, right? But in a bigger company, you get to practice a very different kind of design, and you get to really go deep into certain things that you may not be able to do in a startup, because you're just going from one thing to another in a mad rush. So yeah.
How big is your team now, by the way?
It's pretty small. It's like there are 3 UX people right now.
Okay.
And I'm going to have 2 more people join very soon, but in a COVID situation, joining remotely in different countries. So that's kind of where we are at. And then I have to hire 3 people in India and then 3 people in Japan. So it's kind of the situation.
Right. Okay. Anyone has any other questions that you'd like to unmute or just to shut up? Rupali, yeah. Do you want to unmute and just shut up?
Hi, Aditi. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Yeah, I have a few questions for you. So, like, I have started as a UX designer. Like, I started off as a front-end developer. Then I realized, okay, my passion lies in this thing. So right now I'm working as a part-time UX designer as well. I just started in March, so I'm quite new to it. So I have a few questions for you. Like, since you mentioned that you have worked in like in startups where you probably had to convince people like about the importance of UI UX. You probably had to start things from the scratch. One important task, I guess, is to like create some sort of a design system or a style guide, right? Just curious, like how long does it take to like come up with a style guide?
That's a good question. I think the design system is a holy grail for all the designers. Everyone wants that. I think it depends. I have done. I think there's only one company where I could do like a startup where I could do like a proper design system, and that's Postman. But that was because the CTO was obsessed as well and had mild OCD. So though maybe it was not mild. So it was it was possible for us to do that. I think if you're talking about a design system where the components are React components or it's in the code, then that takes time, and I would say it takes 1 or 2 years, especially if success. I mean, it depends how you measure success. Because I measure success of a design system by its usage. It's pointless to make a design system and then the engineers don't use it. It's really pointless. So even 4 components can be the beginning of a design system if everyone in the company starts using those 4 components, and then you can build from there and evolve the design system. But to reach a mature, like working design system that is useful for the product, I think it takes at least 1 year. Yeah, I think, but it's very hard. So I would say, don't feel bad if it takes time, and it's more important to understand what users need and ship for them first than to build a beautiful design system.
So there's like a difference between a style guide and a design system, because like I can, like for me, like maybe maybe I'm not understanding it properly. Like I thought like maybe design system and style guide are the same, but it's not really the same, right?
I guess it depends, but it's similar. It's a style guide is more like, I think, a visual style guide. At least that's how I see it. We may be talking about the same thing but using different language, so it's okay. But in my case, I'm thinking about something like Polaris, which is like a design system, and the whole like product follows a certain design language and all of that stuff. And that stuff takes time.
Okay, thank you, Rupali.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna take probably one last, because wow, time flies. Actually, it's like 8:15 now.
Yeah.
We're gonna take one last question from Shang. Do you want to unmute and just shout it out?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sushant this
thanks,
side.
guys.
Yeah, this is Sushant this side.
Oh,
So
this is the other one.
yeah, the question which I was asking. So actually, it's something I'm just seeing a pattern in industry right now. So if it's coming from, I'm talking in context of India, like Rupali, and the thing is that anybody can answer to it. That when somebody goes to the UX studies or degree and courses, definitely they do hell lot of ways of working or study hell lot of things. But when it's come to the reality, not every time that everything is required or at every level. So this is something I'm seeing a trend in India, or maybe out. I do not know much that when they throw out a JD of any specific opportunity, especially when there's a product company, they throw a hell lot of stuff. But when I talk about the inside culture, are they really implementing those kind of things or not? That slightly becomes totally different thing. For example, I was talking with one of the folks from Atlassian. They mentioned so many things, but then it came to know that even a designer who has a mid-level or fair level of UX experience can handle the stuff which is required over there. But because that interview process or something, somebody has to that cross that barrier. Somebody is maybe over smart, or somebody just trying to play smart, that okay, do you know this, do you know that, do you know that, but it may not be required. So how this, especially when in right now in Shopify, it's again a software based platform. So how do you suggest, or like what is something is happening? Because this is something, a weird thing I'm facing a lot. Even my juniors, my colleagues facing a lot, that they're not able to, just because of this, that they don't have a proper degree, but they're into industry from past 6 years doing UX and all those things. So that there's a tag over it that you do certification, then we judge you in that manner. But ultimately we're not going to use that much of process, maybe not much of a research required. It's a product enhancement, and the product enhancement may require a fair level of average level of thing. So this something is something I'm noticing a lot from past 4-5 months, that it's hard to clear the interview process, but even it's not required that much of level of UX. So what do you think a fair amount of UX for product centric or software centric company should have, and how to counter those people who are just trying to be slightly smart, because currently they are on the upper hand because they are hiring?
I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that you said, Sushant. Thanks for that question. So one thing, it seems to be about unfairness of the interview process. I think that's really dependent on the company and what they feel is important. I think at some point you do have to play to that, and make sure that your portfolio and how you answer questions in an interview matches with what the company is looking for. In terms of requiring certifications, I really can't say much about that. Every company is different, and every company is looking for a slightly different kind of designers. It may seem unfair, but since you don't have that perspective of being inside the company, you may not understand exactly what they're looking for, and so it may seem weird. But trust me, like all of these companies spend a lot of time thinking about how to interview designers, what the best process is, and stuff like that. But I do agree that self-taught designers versus a designer who's done a degree is the same thing. I personally don't differentiate between those two things, though I know that some companies do and some companies require a certification. Um, but yeah, I can't speak to like exactly which situation. Let's move on to the next question, Sushant, because we are at
Yeah.
Sure.
but
Yeah,
I think someone asked about do we do design sprints?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't do design sprints. We work with the product and engineers on the same track, I would say. So if your question is, Shashank, if your question is, do we have a separate design sprint and then a separate engineering sprint, I think we try to avoid it. We are kind of, I would say my team right now is kind of post sprint, like we don't do sprints as such. We are agile, but usually a designer and engineer kind of pair off and like do stuff. And they have a lot of independence to make decisions about the product as well. So that's kind of how we do it. If it's a more complex project, then we may have some design sprint before the engineering sprint, but it really depends on the size of the project and what we're working on. Was that the only other question, or?
Yeah, I think so. Probably more related to how design and product and engineering kind of work together, right? Because the terminology of design sprint can be understood differently. Like I would understand it as a method for problem solving. Like let's do a design sprint to
Right.
solve a problem, to figure out if this problem is let's validate it, right?
Yeah. Then for sure we do that. I guess, yeah, you're right. It depends on
Yeah.
how you see a design sprint. I guess when most people say design sprint, I'm thinking of a 2-week sprint of
Mm,
like just design, or unless you
yeah.
mean like a 1-day design workshop sprint or a
Yeah.
2-day design
Or like a
workshop.
5 days, the Google Ventures kind of like 5 days design sprint. Yeah. So same but different.
Yeah, so I mean, we would do all of that. It really depends. But my team is so small that it's very rare for 2 designers to work on the same project.
Mm.
I would not consider that very efficient. So usually it's one designer on one big project, and they handle that.
I think we have one last question just to close it off, and this is very similar to what I also wanted to ask is
Okay.
like when it comes to, you mentioned you're hiring, right? So what are some of the things that you look out for that affects your hiring decision? I think not just so much of skills, but also the kind of culture and mindset that the individual need to have. Maybe one reason why people should actually consider joining Shopify.
That's a good question. So I think one of the main things we look for is growth mindset. So obviously we are looking for people who have a growth mindset, and that's very important, because a big company like Shopify, you won't end up always doing exactly that. Your role will change over time, and we need people who can change with that and be flexible and happy to do that as well and learn as the company changes. So for example, the whole company went digital by default. Only people who have like a good growth mindset can survive in such a situation. So I think that's important. In terms of skills, obviously design skills, if I'm hiring a researcher, then the craft skills are important, very important. And of course a huge perk would be like really wanting to work with merchants. Like I think having that would be great for Shopify. We are looking always for people who were entrepreneurs before, or want to be entrepreneurs in the future. A lot of folks that work in Shopify have their own online stores, which is very, very cool. So
Mm.
there is that understanding that we want to hire people who are already super excited about commerce and everything. So that actually becomes more important sometimes than the design skills, because I personally feel that you can learn design skills, but this sort of level of interest is something that I look for. That you're not just here to do the job, though that's fine as well. It would be cool if you were like super excited about it, like everyone else.
Awesome.
So yeah, so that's what I look for. Why join Shopify? We have a 4-day week. No, I think Shopify is a very high care company. They really care about everyone a lot, and I can't say that enough. Like we say it during the interviews, but it's only after you join the company that you actually experience that, and only then will you truly believe it. I think a lot of companies say stuff in the interview process, but it's only this is real. That's all I can say. It's a great culture, and everyone cares a lot about what we're doing, about merchants. It's no one here is an asshole, which is amazing as well. And so as a team, it's great, and the product is great as well. So yeah, and the UX team is amazing. So yeah, please join Shopify.
Okay.
That
So
was pretty cool.
yeah, there's a gong, it's a wrap. Right. Thank you so much, Aditi, for sharing all these wonderful insights, and thanks for everyone who is joining. I'm just gonna share some slides and announcements. Just yeah, hopefully you can still see my screen. Okay, so Shane, are you still there? No, okay, she disappeared. No, Shane is there. You want to share on this? No, okay. Let me share it then. If not, you're gonna say I'm arrowing you. So we have our next run of the community mentoring initiative coming up from September 1st of September to end of the year, and it is really we just did our first run from March or April to end of June, and then I think feedback was pretty okay, and people thought that we should run it one more time. So here it is. If you are interested, you can just of course it's only limited, I think preferably limited to Singapore, so that the context and everything is all contained within in Singapore. Yeah, but if you're interested, you can scan the QR code here or just go to this link to find out more. It will lead you to this Notion page that we'll talk about, like what is it about, the milestones, some FAQ, and so on and so forth, right? And then there is a link for you to express your interests to fill in the form. Okay, so upcoming, there is a conference actually in September 12 to 13, UX Plus. Biggest or not, I'm not sure, but definitely pretty affordable, I think. It's only 50 over Singapore dollars. It's in organized by some community members in the Philippines. And big names actually, like there's Julie Zhou from Facebook, and a number, I just can't remember the rest. Right, but check it out. Again, QR code for you to find out. A friend of mine actually started taking some headshots. I just took mine. So if you need like a nicer mug shot for yourself, feel free to like take this opportunity to maybe take one, refresh your LinkedIn profile or your CV, so yeah.
I really need this.
The usual price is 300 plus, but now it's at $80 because of the whole COVID thing. Yeah. So yeah. That's all for this evening, and thank you all for joining. So we hope to see you again next month, and then there's also September, there's a World Interaction Design Day. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Right.
Yeah, could you just display the links again, please?
Which one? Oh,
All
this
of
one only.
them.
This one. This one.
I was interested in the the mentorship one.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Mike was our mentors for the first batch.
Hey, Can you please show slide 8?
Slide 8. Oh, sure. It's only for Singapore though.
Go on to that one, but I was too embarrassed to ask.
Yeah, if you need, yeah, it's pretty good. And why I'm promoting this because we have our studio, right, or rather it's the IxDA office in Xia Street, but due to the whole COVID thing, well, there's no projects. The studio is pretty much there, but we still have to pay rent. So we kind of like rent it off to our friend who is doing photography, to cover some costs. Yeah. So if you support, then it's also supporting us in paying the rent for the studio.
I'm definitely going to sign up for this. I think I've been using the same black and white picture for like, I don't know, 3 years or something like that.
Yeah, this one, right?
Yeah. I don't know how old it is now.
Okay.
Cool.
So yeah, that's the end. But I mean, if you like to hang around, this is the after party.
Yeah.
Usually the after party is more interesting than the actual event, lah, right? Okay.
Aditi, I'm curious. For y'all, right? Has there been any change in terms of behavior post COVID in terms of merchants and consumers?
I mean, definitely a lot of people are signing up for